Welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive. We always try to focus on what you're interested in, and we've been getting a ton of questions about leadership lately.
It's a hot topic.
It really is. And we know you guys, you don't want just the fluff. You want to know how to actually make an impact without getting bogged down in, you know, theoretical jargon.
Right. Practical advice.
Exactly. So today, we're doing a deep dive on the 6P leadership framework.
And this isn't just like another one of those leadership, kind of generic frameworks.
Yeah, those can feel so robotic.
Exactly, like a to-do list from a robot. What's fascinating about this one, and we're drawing from a few different sources here, the 6P consulting site, their workbook, and this great book called Leadership Wrecked, it's all about building something sustainable, with your whole team.
It's about real change, not just checking boxes.
Exactly.
So let's start with the first P, purpose. I love how Leadership Wrecked puts it. It's like being a Polynesian wayfinder navigating by the stars.
Oh, I love that analogy. Your purpose is your North Star.
Right. And not some vague mission statement, but like a deep understanding of why you do what you do.
And I think this is where the 6P workbook really gets it right, especially if you're working with clients. It really emphasizes this whole idea of identifying your primary customer.
Who are you really serving?
Yeah. Who benefits most from the work that you do? Once you define that, it's like you have this compass.
Yeah. It reminds me of that example in Leadership Wrecked about the medical clinic. They were so clear their unit of production, the center of everything they do, is the patient.
It's about that flow of value creation. And I love how the workbook actually makes you map that out.
Oh, yeah, that visual is super helpful. Okay, so we've got our purpose, our North Star. Now, how do we make it real? Enter the second P, production.
Right, turning that vision into tangible results.
But as Leadership Wrecked warns us, it's easy to get stuck just moving dirt.
Oh, that's such a good way to put it. Looking busy, but not actually making real progress.
Exactly. So how do we avoid that trap? Well, that's where our third P comes in, priority. We've got to focus on what truly matters.
And what's interesting is, and this is something that Leadership Wrecked really emphasized, is that leaders often mistake compliance for support.
Just because your team is following orders doesn't mean they're truly on board.
Yeah, and that can be a slippery slope. Leadership Wrecked calls it change agent syndrome. You can force compliance in the short term, but for sustainable change, you need buy-in. You need people to be truly invested.
You know what really helped me get a handle on this whole priority thing? That DIY section in the workbook on portfolio management. They give you some really practical prioritization techniques.
I'm glad you brought that up because, another big takeaway for me from Leadership Wrecked was this emphasis on crafting high-quality problem statements.
That's so important. It's like we were saying earlier, if you're hammering nails and everything looks like a thumb.
Maybe you're not using the right tool.
Right. And the workbook does a great job with this too. They have these exercises on identifying root causes. It's all about diagnosing before you start prescribing solutions. And this is really interesting to me because it's like we've been building this leadership toolkit, right? With the first three Ps.
Absolutely, the foundation.
Exactly. But now we're getting to the good stuff, the human element.
The heart of it all.
Yes. And I think for a lot of people, this is where things get really, really interesting.
For sure.
So, ready for P number 4.
Hit me.
Presence.
Ah, yes.
And this isn't just about, physically showing up. It's about being truly present, engaged.
Present and invested.
Yes. Leadership Wrecked had this great story about a police chief.
Oh, yeah, in Springdale.
Yes. He'd show up during the night shift. Not to micromanage or anything, but with coffee for everyone.
It's those small gestures.
Exactly. They made his team feel seen, like he cared. And it made a huge difference.
It did. It reminds me of that Moments That Matter section in the workbook.
Oh, yes. Those small interactions can make or break a team.
Absolutely. And the workbook actually encourages you to, identify what those moments are within your own team.
That's so important, right?
Yeah.
Being intentional about those connections.
It is because, it's so easy to get caught up in deadlines and deliverables and all that.
Right.
But it's those moments of genuine connection that really build trust.
Absolutely. Okay, speaking of valuing individuals, P number 5, people.
This is the big one.
Huge. Recognizing the inherent value in every single person on your team.
Seeing them as people, not just cogs in a machine,
Exactly.
Oh.
Leadership Wrecked had that great example from The Office.
Oh, yeah. With Andy.
Yes. When he's, talking about his team, even though they're facing layoffs. It's just such a powerful reminder that, leadership isn't about power. It's about empowering others.
Exactly. And the workbook actually has some exercises for this.
Oh, yeah, I was going to mention that. The DIY exercises on understanding employee experience.
Yes.
Yeah.
And creating connections through coaching,
It's about moving from that kind of transactional mindset to a more relational one.
which can be a big shift for some leaders.
It can. But the thing is, when people feel valued, when they feel heard, they do their best work.
They're more invested, they go the extra mile, and it creates this incredible, positive cycle.
Totally. Okay, last P. Ready?
Moving it on.
Principles. Walk in the talk.
Ah, yes. Living those values.
This one really hit home for me because Leadership Rec had that kind of tough example of that Center for Developmentally Disabled Adults.
Oh, right, where their actions didn't match their words.
Exactly. And it made me think, how do we make sure as leaders that we're actually living our principles,
Right.
especially when things get tough?
That's the question, isn't it? And honestly, this is where self-awareness is just so crucial.
Absolutely. The workbook has a really cool exercise on identifying your core principles.
Both personally and as an organization, right?
Yes, because it's not just about having a fancy mission statement.
Right. It's about aligning your actions with your words.
Because at the end of the day, our actions, they speak so much louder than words.
Right.
Our teams, they're watching us.
Always. They're looking to us for cues for how to behave.
Exactly. So we have to be consistent, especially when it's difficult.
And, being willing to acknowledge when we mess up. Because none of us are perfect.
Oh, absolutely.
And leadership isn't about being perfect. It's about being willing to learn, to grow,
Yeah, and to course correct. So as we're wrapping up this deep dive on the 6 Ps, I'm curious, what are some of the challenges that you're facing in your own leadership role right now?
Oh.
It's funny, we've been talking about these 6 Ps as if they're these separate things, but they're not, are they?
Not at all.
They're all connected, like pieces of a puzzle.
It's a system, really.
Yes, and each P kind of builds on the one before it.
Exactly. I mean, think about it. That clear sense of purpose, that North Star, that's what informs your production, right?
Right, and understanding those processes helps you prioritize more effectively.
Yes. And those priorities should be aligned with your principles.
Which then influences how you show up, how you treat your people.
It's a beautiful thing when it all comes together.
It is, but I can see how it might feel overwhelming, especially if you're new to leadership. Like, where do you even begin?
And that's where I think the 6P workbook is just so valuable. Because it gives you the tools. It's not just theory.
The practical.
Yes, like having a leadership coach in your back pocket.
I love that. One thing that really stuck with me from Leadership Rec was that whole full kit concept.
Oh, yeah.
Don't start a project until you have everything you need.
Simple, but brilliant.
It really is.
Yeah.
How many times do we jump into things and we're like, wait a minute.
Missing something.
Totally. And then it's just frustrating for everyone.
And it sends the wrong message to your team.
Exactly. It's like you're not setting them up for success.
Exactly. And then it all goes back to earning support, building that trust.
And that's where those last 3 Ps, presence, people, principles, that's where it gets real.
The heart of it all.
The human side of leadership.
And that's what leads to sustainable results, because it's not about quick fixes. It's about building something that lasts.
Building a strong team, a healthy culture. So tell me, what resonated most with you today? What one little thing are you going to take action on? What are you going to try differently?
It's a journey, this whole leadership thing.
Yeah.
And the 6P framework, it's like your map.
I love that. So use it, experiment, adapt. The world needs more leaders, but not just any leaders, leaders who really care, who want to make a difference. And on that note, thank you for joining us for another deep dive. We'll see you next time.